everyone, and welcome to the third annual JQT Hanukkah Hotties. My name is Carmel Tanaka. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the founder and executive director of JQT Vancouver, a volunteer-run Jewish queer and trans nonprofit dedicated to queering Jewish space and Jewifying queer space in Vancouver, BC, on the ancestral and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. For Hanukkah this year, we are being generously supported by Creating Accessible Neighborhoods, an organization that advocates for and educates about disabled people with intersecting identities. You can learn more about this fantastic organization doing amazing work at canbc.org. Our community partner this year is LGBTQ at the J, the heart of Toronto's LGBTQ plus Jewish community, providing queer Jews opportunities to gather, celebrate, and thrive. For each candle of the holiday, we have a Hanukkah Hottie joining us to light their Chanukia, or perhaps share another tradition and chit-chat about the wonderful things they do in life for the duration of the candle's burning. For our third candle of Hanukkah Hotties, we are joined by Stav Meishar. Pronouns are she and they, a queer Jewish neurodivergent performance maker, circus-theatre artist, historic researcher, and educator living in Bristol, England. Their work seeks to intersect history and current affairs by amalgamating tools from the worlds of theater, circus, and contemporary performance. Tuning in from Tel Aviv, actually.
Hi.
Hi.
What an honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us and for celebrating Hanukkah together. How fun is this that we're actually in the same country at the moment?
I know, it's such a weird, like the international careers of busy Jewish people. Like we actually live in, the Americas and in England, but here we are in Israel together, but not in the same physical location via Zoom. So
We will soon. I can't wait to also hang out with you in person in real life
yes.
this Sunday. So that's really exciting. Why don't we get started by lighting the Chanukia, and I will bring it into view.
Ooh, beautiful.
That is my movie magic sounds. Okay, I'm ready to light. Are you ready to do the bracha?
Yeah. Baruch atah Adonai אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר קידשנו במצוותיו, וציוונו להדליק נר של חנוכה. ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, שעשה ניסים לאבותינו, בימים ההם בזמן הזה.
Amen.
Yay.
Beautiful. There's actually a tune I have not heard before.
That's the tune I grew up with in Israel.
I love it. Love it, love it, love it. Also, just how similar but different the Jewish community is all over the world and the different traditions that we grow up with, and in this case, different melodies.
Absolutely.
Tough. So the candles are lit, and we are now going to talk about all things Jewish and queer in the world of
Yay.
Stav during the duration
my
of these candles.
thing.
So tell us about life and, you, backstory. How did you end up in Bristol? And
Oh gosh.
we'll start there.
I mean, I'm basically just like a very, very lucky person who gets to make a living doing the things that they already like nerding out about. Like I feel very lucky for that. I mean, it took a lot of work to get people to pay me to do the things I nerd out about, but also luck. So yeah, I grew up in Israel, in Tel Aviv. I'm actually at my grandma's house right now, where I spent most of my childhood.
Hello,
And
soft stuff.
yeah, she's downstairs. We're yeah, we're a rare thing in Tel Aviv. We have a private home with a garden. There's only one neighborhood in all of Tel Aviv. But my grandma, like her family history can be a whole episode of Hanukkah Hotties on unto itself. We can talk about that later. But yeah, I grew up in Tel Aviv. I moved to New York when I was 20 to pursue my musical theater education, which was my first love, theater and musical theater. Graduated, worked in the field professionally, pretty much nonstop for a decade or so. Somewhere along the line, found circus as well and started learning, especially aerial skills. I did silks and then static trapeze and dance trapeze. Started weaving that as well, so still doing some theater work, some circus work, and doing Jewish education on the side as well. I founded a nonprofit organization called Dreamcode Experience, and we were the ones that they bring when they want somebody to do really, really creative things with the kids. Experiential, hands-on Jewish education was my specialty, and we won a few awards for that. So I had a really good life in New York for 10 years, but in as far of making artistic work and getting it supported and getting it out there, it was quite difficult in the US. There aren't a lot of grants, there aren't a lot of opportunities. It's, capitalistic country. If you want to make art, sell tickets. And if you're not selling tickets, it must not be good art, which is not how that works. And I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to move to England, and I took it. And it was a wise choice for my career because the UK does have arts funding and does have, grants and fellowships and residencies and all the things that I always wanted to have in the US I didn't have. And I was finally able to make my artistic career my bread and butter, my main focus. I still do Jewish education. I still enjoy it very, very much. It's always going to be a passion of mine, but moving to England was the best choice I could have made for wanting to get my my artistic work out there, and here we are.
Wow. And also, your artistic work has a lot of intersecting identities. It's a lot of your interests, your personal interests, but also, you're combining genres and whatnot. And I'd love to hear more about the projects that, your first loves, your combining of loves, and then, where you're at now.
Sure. So I've always been a person who struggles to just do the one thing. Even even if you look at my computer, I always have like a million tabs open because I have to keep going between different things. Like I don't know why, but that's how my brain stays focused, is by juggling multiple things. And it's always been like that with my interests as well. So I studied musical theater, but then it was like a certificate program. And when I wanted to convert all those credits to an undergraduate degree, I went to the new school and did pretty much every course imaginable that wasn't musical theater. So I technically have a degree in musical theater because that's the majority of my credits, but the rest of the courses I took were in Jewish culture and gender studies. I have a double minor in those. I have multiple interests. It's how I work. So the first show that I ever made that I still tour with and love deeply, deeply was an intersection of my love of circus, of Jewish culture, and of history. I basically chanced upon the true story of a man called Adolf Althoff, who was the owner of a German circus during the war and saved a branch of a Jewish circus family called the Lorsch family. And I was just so happy when I discovered that story. And I mean, happy. I was excited, I should say, obviously not happy because World War II, but it was super, super interesting to me. And I started pulling on that thread, and it's been almost a decade since I started that research, and the show is finished and I tour with it, but the research itself still continues. Like I still research the history, not just of the Lorsch family, but of Jewish circus artists and families in Europe under Nazi regime. And it's just this whole rich and beautiful world of Jewish arts that not many people know about, right? Like everybody know about Jews in Hollywood or maybe Jews in the Yiddish theater, but not many people know about Jews in circus. And so I became the torchbearer of these stories, and I am honored and lucky to share them and make sure that they live on. And so that's one show. And yeah, there's always intersections of various interests that I somehow managed to pull together and somehow managed to find audiences that are interested in the intersection of them as well.
Well, it's just so incredibly niche, when you think about it. When I think of circus, you think of another group, the Romani people in particular. Um, and the elephants, Dumbo, and things like that. I had never even it didn't even occur to me that there would be Jewish history. And so when I was introduced to your work, I was super, super, super impressed. One, how fascinating, also specifically under Nazi regime. I mean, that will speak to a lot of Jewish people in general because, of the history that's there. A lot of us are carrying stories or might not know our family stories as well. So to be able to have something to latch onto is really, really interesting. And I'm really hoping that we get our funding so we can bring you to Vancouver for
Thank you.
JQT Heritage Month and to be able to share more of this. And so you can do obviously a deeper dive than what we can do during the candles, which is 20-25 minutes or so.
Thank you. It's interesting that you say, so much of us are interested in these stories because we may have personal connections and, family stories we don't know about. People a lot of time ask me after they've seen the show or been to my lecture on Jewish circus history. They ask me if I'm related to any of these families, and I'm not. I have no familial connection to them whatsoever, but the interest definitely came not just from the fact that I was a circus artist, but also from the fact that I am a granddaughter of Holocaust survivors, and there isn't much left of my family or their stories. And as a storyteller, that's always been something that, it sits with me. It's a trauma. And so to
Oh,
be able,
100%.
yeah, and to be able to research stories and tell another family stories has been almost therapeutic because they were celebrities in their heyday, and so there's lots to research, there's lots to uncover, and so it feels almost I can't with my family stories, it's a dead end. There's only so much I can go, and then that's it. There's nothing more to find, whereas with them there's always more. And so it feels a little bit like you know a little restorative in a way. And even in my show, I ended up weaving my own experience as a grandchild of survivors living with multi-generational trauma. I wove that story with the story of Adolf Althoff and the Lorches, because it is why I'm doing this research. It is the fire under my bum. And it's always interesting to talk to audiences in the lobby after they show and hear that they weren't just moved by this brave story of rescue in the circus, but they're also really touched and moved by hearing from a third generation person who's still carrying that trauma, who is basically offering their trauma to the audience each night on stage. I joke that it's my form of therapy. I don't need to pay a therapist, they pay me.
Yeah, you're being paid to do emotional labor. I really resonate with that also as a granddaughter of Holocaust survivors. A lot of the Jewish community work and projects that I do specifically are this because my turn of the last century grandparents are no longer living and there's really no one to ask. And to be perfectly honest, had I been born earlier when they were alive, would I have had the language skills to be able to ask them the questions that I would have wanted to ask them? Would their English have been good enough? No, the level of maturity as well as where I'm at today, yeah, it just wouldn't have worked out. But through the work that I'm doing, I'm getting a lot of I mean, it's my form of therapy for sure. But I am worried, not to like digress into a completely different issue, but I am worried about the cycle of trauma and the re-triggering, especially in the work that we do, and to make sure that we don't, how do you say, continue to fall into patterns. And I don't know how you're dealing with that,
I
if at
mean,
all.
yeah, it's I think I also recognize kind of the privilege that I have as an Ashkenazi Jew. Like my traumas are not denied, unless, you're talking about Holocaust deniers, but luckily they're a minority. Like generally, my family's trauma is taught and is recognized, and the world over knows about it. And that's not a privilege that a lot of people who have suffered institutional or systemic oppression can claim. So I am fortunate. I do feel very lucky for that, and at the same time I do feel that I have to keep telling these stories because there are Holocaust deniers, and because survivors are dying and there's no longer firsthand, very soon there's not going to be people telling their firsthand accounts. So it does, it feels like a responsibility. It feels like something that I need to do, that I owe to my ancestors. And yeah, I don't really know. I know it takes a toll on me. I'm not,
Hmm.
yeah, I'm not gonna argue that. Um, it's a lot.
This is
Every
hard
tour,
work. It's
yeah, whenever I
emotional.
finish a
It's
tour, it's a lot. It's a lot after every show. It's a lot after each tour is over. Like I have my own, rituals of self-care and ways to replenish my batteries, but yeah, it's just really weird, because when it comes to live performance, theater especially, you're repeating the same show again and again, right? Like you're not deviating. There's the same blocking, the same lines, and even though I've done this show so many times, like I still can't make it to the end of it without being a total mess. It just there's no way I can perform this show and keep myself separate. It's just not possible.
impossible to separate one's personal from the work that we do. I think that's the life of an artist in general, but particularly, as Jews as well, when you're dealing with Jewish history. What I would like to know is how you're weaving in your queer identity these days. You've got some really cool lectures and other projects on the go. Do you
Yeah,
share?
so basically, when I made the Escape Act, when I made my Holocaust circus show, that aspect of sharing my own story as well and weaving it with the history of another family was something that I felt was very powerful and, like I said, a little therapeutic while also being a little triggering. But I felt like I'm onto something here. And I knew I wanted to make another historic show. I realized like this is what I love. I really love nerding out about very, very niche history. And I came across the true story of a circus artist called Barbette, who was a gender bending circus artist in Europe, who was active mostly in the 20s and 30s. He had this gorgeous, gorgeous 10-minute act that combined trapeze and Roman rings and wire walking and some burlesque. And he was just gorgeous and tricked his audiences to think that he was a female impersonator was the term at the time. But when you look at it through like a 21st century gender queer theory lens, it wasn't quite female impersonation. It was more like a non-binary musing on the notion of gender and of gender performance and of bodies through a gender. He was really ahead of his time. And I really, really loved his story and I wanted to tell it, but I didn't want to make yet another show where I explore my own queer identity by weaving it with it. Like it felt a little masturbatory, to be rude. And I came up with a concept that I've nicknamed an open source play. It borrows from programming languages, basically. Open source is a programming language where the programmer creates like a skeleton for you, but you can change it up and flex it as you choose. So I did that, but with a play. So I created an open source play that allows artists to basically tell their own gender journey by weaving it with Barbette's story and with the themes in his life. And that was my master thesis. My defense seminar is actually this week. I just sent my thesis. Yay, I'm going to be a master of circus soon, which I really like. I like that title, Master of Circus.
Oh my gosh,
So
Mazel Tov. This is
thank
huge.
yeah, it's big. So yeah, so that's been my major project on weaving queer work with circus work, with history work, with theater work. Um, and I'm really proud of that open source script. Like I'm really happy that I've created a tool for queer artists who want to tell their story and not quite sure where to begin. They can pick it up and there it is, like a whole toolbox of here's how to make your very own unique show telling your history with barbettes.
And how will people be able to get a hold of this on your website?
They can message me because I do want to know where it is. Like, I don't want it to be downloadable, so I never know who's making what. I want to know,
Mhm.
but it's free. Like, I'm not, I'm not gonna take royalties or anything. It's just, I'm thinking of it as like, here's my gift to queer artists, and yeah.
Beautiful. So how do we get in touch with you?
My website has a contact form, stavmeishar.com. There's a contact page.
Yeah, no, that's really fascinating. Well, I can only imagine how much work went into your master's, and you must be so excited to be, coming to the fruition of your project and getting it out there for the world to enjoy. It'd be really interesting to talk to you, like, say, 5 years from now and see like where the project has been used and who's
Yeah.
been doing that.
I
And
really
yeah,
hope people pick it up. Like you release a thing into the world and you don't really know if anyone's going to be interested. It might just be that it sits on my computer and no one asks for it, or it might be that people do. I'm not sure. I know that in the course of my master's degree, I've had people who heard about the research and invited me to basically teach the open source script, like help artists make their way through it. So be like director slash dramaturg. And it's been amazing to put this open source play to the test and see that it works. Like it really does what it's aimed to do, and to be able to be there and guide artists through it has been an honor and a privilege, and I hope there'll be more invites like that, because like I said, I'm happiest when I get to do my interests, and circus and queering the circus history and teaching, those are all things that I love. So
we'll happily share it on JQT socials once it's available. And perhaps this will move on to, I don't know if you want to continue with your academic career, but it sounds a lot like postdoc or even just doc,
there will
like
be
your
a
PhD.
PhD eventually once I recover
Yeah.
from my master's degree.
Oh, for sure, for sure. But like the assessing part of it, and like seeing how it's being used in the field, will be, I think, really, really super, super interesting.
I hope so.
Um, your first love, musical theater. I heard you sing that blessing. You got a nice voice there.
Thank you.
When you were a young kid in Tel Aviv, thinking about what you will be when you grow up, did you have a clear idea as to
Oh yeah.
what you would?
Oh no, I'm a very anal person. I had a very clear idea of what my life would be like, what my career would be like, and I was young and silly enough to think that that I have 100% control over the course that my life will take, and that
Right.
what I want as a teenager will remain what I want forever. So, foolish notions you grow out of. I still love everything I used to love as a teenager. Like, I don't think I'm that different of a person, but I've learned better how I want to explore these interests. As a teenager, I very much thought that I want to, get my degree in musical theater, start working professionally, and eventually make it to, Broadway or West End, and be a lead actress in all the musicals I love. And I still love musical theater. I still do theater and musical theater gigs every so often when the gig is right. Um, but I didn't realize, you know, how frustrating it can be to never tell your own stories. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I mean, actors do a fantastic job inhabiting characters written by others and making it their own. But to me, I think telling my own stories and making my own work was an important step in the journey. And I sometimes do think, like, I ask myself, if 13, 14-year-old Stav would see me today so far away from her original dreams, what would she think? And I'm 100% sure she would be like, oh my God, you're so cool. How did you end up this cool? Like nerdy cool, like not like badass cool, very, very nerdy cool. But still, like I get to perform my own work, and I get to research things that interest me, and I live in a house in a beautiful green town with my own garden. I make sourdough bread, like these things, like a lot of things that really make me happy. And yeah, I think teenage Stav would have approved.
Excellent. And you've got various different experience in different countries. You're saying Israel, America, and the UK. And I'm just curious, like as a queer Jewish, oh, I almost blew those out.
Don't blow the candles.
As a queer Jewish artist, oh my gosh, I didn't realize when you say Jewish, there's like a lot of wind that comes through the mouth.
It's the
Now we know
ancestors
this.
coming through your mouth.
The ruach of my ancestors.
Yeah.
Um,
The dibba
is wind for those who don't know that word.
Same
I'm
word
just
for wind and spirit. Ruach.
wind. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
Sorry, we got
So,
sidetracked. Go ahead.
but that's because we're neurodivergent and it's okay. We'll just go with the flow.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm just curious, like, what has been your experience being a Jewish queer artist in queer artist spaces and Jewish artist spaces, and like wanting to like combine those two things together?
So here, I'll tell you of a recent experience that answers the question. Right before I came to Israel this time, like literally a week ago, my partner and I went to a party in London called Bat Mitzvah, like Butt Mitzvah, which I warmly recommend to anyone who's in London when they happen. They do two parties a year for Hanukkah and for Passover, and they are a queer Jewish party line. And it's been my first time going to one of their parties. And I just remember this like moment at the height of the party, you know, like probably midnight or so, which is very late for me. I know it's not for most. For me, it was late. And there was, you know, like a live band on stage, and they were playing this like upbeat, fun version of Mashiach. And the whole audience, like it was, I'm guessing about 2,000 people in there. The entire audience just like spontaneously got into these like horror circles. And it felt very much like a mosh pit, but like horror circles mosh pit, and everybody was dancing and screaming, and everybody was dressed in the most queer ways. There was like a whole menorah of people, like, you know, 8 people being the candles. It was like there was, and it was just this like crazy moment of queer Jewish joy, you know. With, I just remember like I was standing there, and usually I hate mosh pits, like my neurodivergent, like it's too much sense, it's sensory overload, it's too much. And I was just standing there, like not in the circles, to the side, and everybody was pushing me. It was very tight and noisy, and it was so much, but I was elated. I was so happy, and I just started crying, like in the middle of a frigging, you know, London club party. I just broke down in tears while everybody's singing Mashiach, Mashiach and dancing around me, because it just dawned on me out of the blue that I've never felt as safe as I felt in that moment, because I've never been in a space that large where my Jewish and queer selves intersected. Like I've been in queer spaces, I've been in Jewish spaces, I've even been in smaller like meetings of queer Jews, but I've never been in such a large space where it was my people. It was people with shared identities, shared experiences. And I just started crying because I realized I'm 34 and this is the first time I've experienced a truly safe space. And it's, you know, it was a weird realization too, because it's not that I haven't felt safe before, but having now been in that party, having now been in that space, I'm like, I never truly had a safe space. I just didn't know I didn't have it because I didn't know what it felt like. And it was just this really like, it was a really happy moment, but also a really sad moment, because to be 34 and only just found my first safe space, it was like, shit, you know? So there's your answer.
Yeah.
Saying that's before we've added the neurodivergent thing.
Right. Just to complicate things a little bit more. Yeah, so in Vancouver on November 25th, JQT hosted an event with another artist who we know in common, Stav Meishar, a former Hanukkah Hottie. And there was one time in the evening where it was, you know, Stuart does like a whole like from beginning to end thing, really guides people through what Shabbat is through an immersive ritual performance, and it's really quite lovely.
Love it.
And we did some very quick speeches, and the place that was hosting, well, JQT was hosting, but the venue host is a synagogue on the east side of Vancouver. And the representative just did a very simple asked who is, you know, in entering the synagogue for the first time, and literally the majority of the people raised their hand.
Yeah.
And there was like a huge round of clapping and just like it was quite something special. And just realizing that a lot of these people are adults and it's their first time ever entering a synagogue, a lot of them queer Jews. That says a lot about other things. Not saying that we need to be able to go into a synagogue in order to be queer Jews, but like it just, that says something at 2022, the year 2022, that
It
is
tells me
still
about how
a thing.
much queer Jews feel that their identity has space in the Jewish spaces,
Yeah.
has room.
That's also why JQT exists and needs to continue to exist right now. A lot of people are like, well, it's being queer, it's like kind of passe now. Like everyone's queer.
We've
Um,
only just
and
begun, bitches.
yeah,
Sorry.
no, but it's so true. It really truly is. And we did a timeline of Jewish queer and trans activity in our province of British Columbia, and it wasn't until 2004 that gay marriage was considered legal. And then there were after that like 15 to 20 years and still ongoing of like the various different Jewish denominations in BC trying to figure out if they're also going like now that it's legal in the province, how are they going to deal with that at a micro level as a synagogue? And it's a fascinating journey when you read it. And it's like up to the board, of each synagogue, even though that there's like national movements. It varies from Canada to the US, and in many ways, it's 10 to 15 years behind whatever, say, like the reform movement in the US decides to do, whether it's from same-sex marriage to like recognizing patrilineal Jews, that kind of
Yeah,
thing. This stuff, not even talked about yet, really often in the Canadian reform movement.
yeah, absolutely.
So.
We're just beginning, and the road ahead is long. And I think now that I'm visiting Israel again, I think it's especially true here. I know we get a lot of applause for, I guess, LGBT legislation in comparison to other Middle Eastern countries. I'm not saying we're not like, it could be worse. It could definitely be worse. But the relationship of Judaism in Israel to LGBT community in Israel is not a good one. Not a good one at all. Like my little brother was just visiting me in England, and it was pretty much his first time abroad, and we passed by this beautiful old church, and there was a giant uh, pride flag, a progressive pride flag with like the little trans triangle inside, and a sign that says "All are welcome here." And my brother was just like, "This is outside of a church, really?" And I'm like, "Yes." He's like, "Oh, we would never see that in Israel with a synagogue." I'm like, "Yeah." Like it's the road ahead is long, but you know, but we're up for the work. We're up for it.
We certainly are. I mean, I was walking in, so I'm working on my documentary, the Japanese Oral History Project at the moment, and it has me traveling to various different cities in the country, but also like in Japan next year. And I've already done Canada and the US just to give context to people tuning in.
Partners.
And I was walking around Tel Aviv and just noticing that, there's a bunch of pride flags. I didn't see the progressive flag at all. And I was like, okay, so it hasn't arrived yet, or maybe, it's coming. Um, and so I was like, oh, Tel Aviv, we are trans friendly, or at least queer friendly for the most part. But then I went up to Haifa and I was eating falafel with a friend, a Muslim Arab friend. And I was with my mom, and we were getting from Falafel Orion, which is, famous in Haifa, or Orion is how they might be saying it here. Anyway, we're there, and I see three beautiful trans kids come up and order, um, Arab trans kids come and order falafel. And the look on everyone's faces destroyed my heart.
Oh,
Not only the people who were waiting in the lineup, but also the people who were owners or people working employees of the place. And it just like it parted like the Red Sea when they arrived to go up to the till. And I wished I had my Sailor Moon Vans on because I got my my Pride shoelaces and everything. And I wanted, to like show them like, look, I'm
Look,
a friend. I'm a
I'm
friend.
queer signaling. Look.
And I was frozen because I was also stuck in a situation where my mom, I love you, mom, but my mom doesn't tend to disclose my queer identity to people here in Israel, to family and close friends. And I haven't really ever had a full-on conversation with our Arab friends as well, who are family to us. I mean, we're all Facebook friends and they see everything that I'm posting. So I mean, like, they must surely know. I mean, it's been over a decade
Yeah.
at this
I
point.
feel I feel like my work is my own small way of making my family a little more accepting of these things. Like my family is like a liberal, progressive, Tel Aviv, bohemic family. They're as far as Israel concerned, they're as good as it gets, but they're still within Israel. And even within
Right.
Tel Aviv, like it's still a little backwards. My
Yeah.
family doesn't like they understand like homosexuality and lesbianism. They don't quite get transness. They definitely don't get
Yeah.
non-binary identities. But with my MA, like in talking about what I'm working on and what I'm researching, they got a little bit. I also recently started, recently over COVID, where everybody moved to online programs, I started lecturing about my research. So I've been researching not just about like the Jewish circus family, but I also have a lecture about queer and Jewish lenses on film and television, which was successful enough that I've expanded it into a course. I just finished teaching my first semester. And yeah, and it's just been, like it's been super, super interesting to apply queer and Jewish lenses to movies and to television
Mm.
shows and to be able to talk to that about my family. Like we're talking about Yentl, for example, which my whole family knows. It's Barbara Streisand. All Jews know Yentl. And talking about like, it's so obviously Jewish, but then there's also so many queer
So
themes to it.
obviously queer too.
Yeah. And to talk about my family's now is like, Yentl's not trans. She just wanted to study Torah. That's why she had to dress up as a boy so she can study Torah. And then like, no, but like they have a point. The movie is like that because Barbara Streisand took it in that direction. But the original Bashevis Singer novel is actually much more queer than that. And that's a lot of the research I've been doing and a lot of what we talk about in my classes.
Mm.
And so I get to talk about that with my family and give them like, a drop in the ocean of what I've been doing with my students this semester. And it surprises them, but it also like opens new avenues
Right.
in their brain. And yeah, I'm these aren't easy conversations to have with anyone. They're even harder to have with your family. Um, but I'm glad that I get to challenge their perceptions of these things, and I'm glad that I get to like, push them a little outside of their comfort zone because, their hearts are in the right place. They are generally quite welcoming and progressive in
100%.
my own family.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I feel like things that people are against are just things they haven't understood yet, right? Like
Right.
ignorance is the source of so much hatred. And so if we were to cure the ignorance, hopefully we would cure the hate and the um foreignness of it as well.
Well, I have to tell you something that it might be a small win given, the fact that we were at that falafel shop in
Mhm.
Haifa. And, the people were saying, like, look, they're men dressed as women. And I said, I think it's wonderful. But I said it in Hebrew, and I never know if people fully understand my accent because it's completely anglicized. So, like, I just saw confusion, like, can't compute what I had
Mhm.
just said. But then my mom said, there are a lot of people who are trans in where we live in Canada. That was what we said, and we left it at that. And I was like, Vodla. It's like,
Yeah,
done.
there are a lot of trans people everywhere, and
Yeah,
this whole
yeah.
this whole concept that transness is new and it's in
Mm.
fashion. That's why everybody's trans these days. It's just like, no, we finally live in a time in history. As a historian, I can say this, like we finally live in a time where people can be trans and not be as concerned. Like I'm not saying it's 100% safe, it's not, but for the first time in history, this is something that's in mainstream conversation and is being a little more normalized than before. And so it's not the trans is in fashion and there's so many trans people now where there weren't before. There were just as many before. You just didn't know it because
Mm.
they didn't
You
feel
just didn't
safe
know.
to live outwardly as their trans self. And Jewish history actually has, I need to find it, but there was like this beautiful story of a trans person in some shtetl in Eastern Europe who was living their trans life, and their whole shtetl accepted it. Like, that's just, I need to look it up because I don't want to miss things.
The Fiddler on the Roof that I want to see.
Exactly. Yeah, we've always been around. We just didn't feel safe enough to tell y'all.
Yeah. Well, it's Hanukkah, and I did a little bit of sneaking, stalking on your Facebook wall, and I noticed the sufganiyat,
Oh my
the
God, yes,
donuts.
Sufganiyat in Israel. Crazy.
Right. And I also saw the comment in the thread, which I love, because the insanity of the decorations that are on these donuts since I last lived here 8 years ago has
Crazy.
completely gone bonkers.
That comment was from my Canadian aunt. I have family in Canada. Did you know?
I did not know that. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Small world. What's their name? No. We can play
No,
geography.
it is actually like basically my father's brother, my uncle, married a Canadian woman who came to volunteer on their kibbutz. They're not married anymore. They're divorced. She lives in Canada. But yeah, I have an aunt in Canada. I have a cousin in Canada who's exactly my age, 1 month apart. Yeah, family history is fun. Maybe one day I'll make a show about my kibbutz side of the family, my grandparents who founded a kibbutz with their own bare hands, where there was nothing but basalt rock. Am I saying it right? Basalt? Yeah.
Yes. I actually don't think I've ever said this word in ever.
Neither have I. I've read it. I've never said it aloud. It's that rock that used to be
first
lava.
one. I don't know if you can see it. I'll put it.
The
flame.
Yeah,
the first one. We're
no,
running out of time.
I think one day I'll have to make at least one show about my family's history that's not the Holocaust side, because yeah, there's some amazing stories in my family.
I bet. I mean, that's also it's a whole other tangent. Yeah. Well, is there anything that you would like to share about being queer, Jewish, neurodivergent, and an amazing human? They'd like to share with us?
I think just the joy of it, really. It's something I think about a lot as a performance maker whose work is very like narrative based, is that so much of the stories we've had from Jewish people, queer people, neurodivergent people is about the struggles and the traumas. And those are very important stories. I'm not saying they're not, but there are also so many stories of joy. Like, there are so many moments where my Jewishness makes me happy and my queerness enriches my life, and even my neurodivergence. Like, it's hard being a neurodivergent person in a neurotypical world, but it also gives me perspectives that other people don't have. And it gives me superpowers that other people don't have, like the nerding out about a topic. Like, that's such an autistic thing. And I'm so grateful to that, because I have a career now thanks to being so like nerdy and never letting go of topics that interest me. So yeah, I think this is a big bonus in not being a young thing anymore. I mean, I'm still youngish, but like being in my 30s as opposed to who I was as a teenager and in my 20s, like I'm so much more comfortable in my own skin, and I'm so much more accepting of these things that are struggles. Like, they are, like I said, it's hard to find a safe space, but I'm really proud of these parts of my identity. I love celebrating them. I love sharing them with people. Like, I don't think there's a single person in my environment that doesn't know that I am all of these things. I'm not hiding them. I'm very, very proud to be the intersection of queer, Jewish, neurodivergent. Yeah, there are joys to these identities, definitely.
I think that's a wonderful place to conclude. I would love to thank you, Stav Meishar, for joining JQT today as our third Hanukkah Hottie. Definitely be sure to follow all of their work on their socials and website. As I said, listed in the event description. Thank you to our sponsor organization, Creating Accessible Neighborhoods, and our community partner, LGBTQ at the J. And thank all of you for tuning in to JQT Hanukkah Hotties. Happy Hanukkah and Chag Hanukkah Sameach.
Thanks for having me, JQT. Chag Hanukkah Sameach.